Welcome to our second session on our child nutrition program, and we've called this The Importance of Good Nutrition for Children. Now, we have already looked at that a little in our first session, and we will now continue. Nutritious food has many important benefits. Now, when it comes to food, some foods are more nutritious than others, as you know, but most of what comes into our bodies and into the bodies of our children should actually be nutritious. Because it is very much involved with the growth and the development of all parts of the body, but also the brain. And we looked a little at the brain in our last session. It will help to give some health protection to our bodies, but particularly to our immune systems. And the immune system, all body systems to me are amazing. The immune system is especially amazing. It's like millions of soldiers fighting. They're actually blood cells. And they stop things from going wrong inside. And that's very important. When the immune system is suppressed, as we call it, or it starts to go down, then there will be more sicknesses. When it goes way down, then we have something that is called AIDS, and the person usually will die. And so the immune system needs to be nice and strong. And you might say, well, what do I need to do for my immune system to be strong? For my child's immune system to be strong? We need to have good food. We've talked a little when we were cooking about the colours in food. Now, they look good, and we do eat with our eyes, but they are also very important to protect us from disease at cell level. And so the immune system plays a vital part in maintaining our health and well-being, as well as in our restoring health once something goes wrong. It also will help to protect your children against adult diseases. And so health and well-being is important at all ages, but the foundation is actually laid when we are children. And sometimes we forget this. And I have mothers who say to me, but my children won't eat this or they won't eat that. And it's almost like, well, I give up. There are many children today, and this is really concerning to me, who are virtually addicted. And I know alcohol and tobacco is bad, but I know of children who are fairly young and they are addicted to fried food. And unless it's crisp and it's been fried, we're not really all that interested. Yes, a drink of lemonade to wash it down is okay, but most food for some children needs to be fried. And that is a big concern. And we are laying a wrong foundation for the rest of their lives. They will be at much greater risk of heart disease and also certain cancers as well, and diabetes. Energy regulation. And so when we have good food coming in, it actually helps too with regulating the energy in the system, so that they don't feel really flat and terrible. And then when they have some sugary food, they feel good again. And then, an hour later, they're really flat and tired again, and they need to have another fill. Protection for their teeth and their gums is very important too. And that also is part of good, nutritious eating and a healthy lifestyle. And you know what else is a real bonus? Well, it is for them too, but especially for parents, and that is improved behaviour. And that's always appreciated, isn't it? It is for me too. Let's have a look at the age where the greatest growth occurs. Again, we referred a little to that in our first session. The greatest growth rate is between the time a baby is born and they are 1 year of age. You say, really? But, they're so small. Birth weight triples. Length increases by the average of 17 centimetres. And at this stage, 50% of the baby's food intake is used by the brain. Remember in the first session we looked at a chart where it showed brain growth, tremendous between birth and 1 or 2 years of age. And so the greatest growth rate in a person's life is actually from the time they're born until they're 1 year old. Quite amazing. Good to remember. The circumference of a baby's brain and head grows by about 12 centimetres. That's from the time the baby is born until it reaches 12 months of age. This huge surge will influence a child's intelligence and how well they do at school. Now remember, this is from birth to 1 year old, and so very important for those early years. Obviously, every other part of the body is growing too. Your skin, your immune cells, your lymphatic system, the muscles, the organs, your hair, your bones, and your teeth, they are all growing. But we thought that was rather interesting about the brain. And so looking at growth and brain development, an important reason for good nutrition is to supply the needs of the growing brain. Now the brain, fortunately, doesn't stop growing at 1 year of age. But until the child is around 16 years of age, there is quite a lot of growth. And so remember that when it comes to providing food for your children and providing the right sort of drinks for your children and encouraging them to go out and be active. Because when you supply your child with good food, it will supply their energy needs. And that's probably the first thing that comes to our minds when we say good food. Energy, and certainly very important. But also for growth. If you've ever seen documentaries of countries where there is not enough food, where children and parents are starving, and that is really sad. Have you noticed that the children are fairly short in stature? They're not tall because growth is also dependent on nutrition. Having good nutrition also regulates body processes, and it will protect against disease. And that is also very important. So good nutrition really looks after our bodies physically, mentally, and as we said, there's a social side as well as we're eating, and if there's a relaxed atmosphere, all of that has a positive influence. So when we look at energy, and you might say, well, what sort of foods do we need to provide our children and ourselves for energy? Carbohydrates are the foods that the body prefers for energy, or it's the nutrient that the body prefers for energy. And sure, you might say, well, what sort of foods do I need to choose so that I can have these carbohydrates in my diet? Just before we go there, carbohydrates quite a few years ago, and maybe even today in a small way, almost became a bad word. If you eat too many carbohydrates, you're going to get really fat. And it's not good for you. Better off to have lots of protein and a small amount of carbohydrates. That is not correct. We have to look at the quality of carbohydrates. True, it's not good when all the carbohydrates comes from sugars, because carbohydrates come from sugars and from starches. And so if you or your child is eating a lot of food that is high in refined sugar, then that's not a good source of carbohydrate. But if you're getting adequate amounts of whole grains, which are the starches, and there'll be some natural sugar there, fruit is going to have some natural sugar as well, then that is a very good source of energy. Because everything that the body needs to change that food into energy is already there, including the range of B vitamins that the body needs to change that into energy. If I have a biscuit, or I have a chocolate bar, or I have a drink of fizzy drink, if I have a can of fizzy drink, there are around 10 teaspoons of sugar in there. Now, everything that my body needs to change that into energy isn't there. And the body has to go to the reserve supply, which we have, fortunately, and take some of those nutrients that are necessary to change that into energy. Now, if that happens on an occasion, that probably may not be the worst thing. But if that happens on a regular basis, you can see what's happening. It robs your system of some very important nutrients that it needs for various body functions. And the B vitamins in particular are very much involved with the nervous system. So I call them the anti-cranky vitamins. Not to be going and taking extra vitamins, just making sure that they're there as part of the food that you are providing for yourself and for your children. And so carbohydrates are important, and the body prefers them for energy. The body also will use fat for energy. We all know that. And certainly it is not good for a child under the age of 5 to be on a very low-fat diet, unless the doctor recommends that because there is some medical problem. They need to have adequate amounts. That doesn't mean everything fried and lots of fat coming in. Not at all. But they need to have an adequate source of fat coming in. But carbohydrates are very important because they don't just supply the energy. If it comes from whole grains, they will have fibre as well. And so looking at fats, and I call that the facts on fat. There are different types of fat. There are good ones and there are bad ones. The bad fats are the ones that are solid at room temperature, and they are called saturated fat. And so these are fats that come from animal sources. These are also fats that have been manufactured by people, and they are called trans fats, where they hydrogenate oils so that they have a solid fat that comes from a plant source. And so when you look at the nutrition panel on the label of a product, and it might say vegetable fat, and you say, wonderful, vegetable, this must be good. But if it's vegetable fat, it has been hardened artificially, and it will have the same effect as the animal fats, which also are solid at room temperature. And what you will find is when it comes to prepared foods, like processed foods, you'll find that they have a very high level of these trans fats or these solidified vegetable oils in them. There's a good reason for that. From the manufacturer's point of view, it gives shelf life, and that's important so that their products can sit there longer, and it also gives a nice texture. And so be careful not to have too many processed foods in your pantry, in your fridge, because if they're there, the children are going to eat them, and it's better for them not to have too many of those. And so fats are a concentrated source of energy. And you know that everything that we take in that is excess to what the body needs is stored as fat. I'm sure most of us would wish that the body didn't do that, but it does, just in case there's a famine one day. And so the types of foods that are fairly high in these wrong fats or bad fats, whatever you want to call them, and they're usually hidden. Interestingly, 75% of your fat that goes into our bodies and into the bodies of our children, they are hidden. Or they come in the company of a product where you'd say, well, I can't see fat there. If I have a piece of meat and I see the fat on the outside, we say, yep, there's fat. If I have a biscuit, now we know what's in biscuits because most of us have made them, you can't actually see the fat. And so you say, oh, there's not a lot in there. And if you have something occasionally, that's not so bad. But if you have it regularly, it's not good. So the types of foods that are fairly high in these wrong sort of fats are the fried foods, takeaway foods, snack foods, potato chips, even the dried potato chips, the crisps as we call them, ice cream, cream, of course, pastries, biscuits and cakes. Again, not saying that you can never have these if you choose to, but keep them at a minimum because that's what kids live on. Some children do, and it's not good. And they will pay the price later on in life. And when you think about it, and as I said at the beginning, I have a very passionate feeling about health and nutrition for children because they are the future of our country. They are also the future of our families, and we certainly need to look after them and give them the best possible start in life. So we've looked at carbohydrates and we've said, yes, whole grains are really important. We've also looked at fats now, and the good fats need to be there in moderate quantities and not too many of the bad fats. We also need protein. The body needs protein for growth and development. Very important for children. Not for them to have lots of protein, but they certainly do need it. Now, as we get older, we still need all these nutrients because the body is constantly replacing the cells that are dying and the new ones are being developed. But we don't need lots of protein as adults. But children do need to have adequate amounts of protein because they're growing and developing. And so dairy foods, meat and eggs are sources of protein, fish as well, and chicken. Soya beans also are a very good source, and soya beans and those animal proteins are considered to be a complete protein. Then there are other proteins from dried beans and peas, from whole grains, from whole grain breads, from nuts and seeds, and to a smaller amount from vegetables that are considered to be incomplete. And years ago, when we first learned all this, we said, oh, this is not good. We must make sure that we have plenty of meat and animal products for our health and well-being. We now understand that that is not necessary. And so these plant proteins actually complement each other and they then also become complete. They do not all have to be there on the same plate at the same time as we used to think. They can be there through a day or a day and a half. And so when good nutrition comes into our children's bodies, then all of that works itself out nicely and is not a worry. Now we've got vitamins and minerals. So we've looked at carbohydrates, fats and protein, vitamins and minerals. They support growth, they provide protection from illness, and they also, very interestingly, help other nutrients to work effectively. So vitamins and minerals are very important. It maintains good eyesight or vision. It builds healthy skin and tissues. When you've cut yourself, it helps to heal the wounds. And when wounds don't heal, that's a fairly good sign that things are not all that wonderful inside here. And so, children fall and cut themselves. And when they heal fairly quickly, you know that things are working fairly well inside. The other thing that's important, and we referred just a little to it before, and that is the vitamins and minerals are necessary to release energy from the food that we eat. And so, yes, vitamins and minerals are very important. And before people start to say to themselves, I wonder which brand I should buy. Vitamins and minerals ideally need to come from food, because they're there in a network that the body needs for it to be able to function effectively and efficiently. Yes, they are available in tablet form too. And if something is wrong and the body's not able to absorb certain nutrients in the quantity that is necessary for good health, well then a doctor will advise you to perhaps buy some of these. However, in general, when you think nutrients, please think food. And particularly the plant foods, because there is lots and lots of vitamins and minerals in there. Just want to look for a few minutes at iron. Iron is an essential mineral. Very, very important, because it is involved in the production of healthy red blood cells. It carries oxygen right around the body, very important for energy and also for life. There are two types of iron, and I just want to spend a couple of minutes just explaining what these types are and how we can get good absorption from the two types of iron. The first type is a type of iron that comes from animal products, and it's called heme iron. We all relate heme to blood, and yes, that's where it comes from. And so foods that do not contain blood do not contain that particular type of iron, which is called heme. And so when you look at plant foods and you also look at eggs, you'll find that they have the type of iron that is called non-heme iron, because it doesn't come from a blood source. Now, milk is not really a source of iron, and so I haven't included that, but that also would come under that non-heme, but it is not a good source. And so when you are a vegetarian or you are wanting to include more plant foods in your diet, then it's good to remember that for the type of iron that comes from plant foods, that you have a vitamin C food at the same meal. And again, I say a vitamin C food because coming from food, you've got everything there that the body needs, not just a vitamin C tablet. So a vitamin C food with most of your meals. And you might say, how am I going to do that? A little fruit with your breakfast, some fresh vegetables with your lunch. Now you might say, I'm feeding a child and he's not really into salad. Some fruit juice or even some vegetable juice, just a small amount. They do not need large glasses of it, just a small amount will enhance the absorption of that iron. And so very important for everyone. It's important for me, I'm a vegetarian. It's important for my children, for my grandchildren who are mostly vegetarians too. But it's important for everyone because people who are on a mixed diet are also going to get iron from plant foods, not only just from the meat that they consume. And so they will get a better absorption. Very important for girls as they start to mature. It's important for boys too, but girls have a greater need, as you know. And so iron from plant sources, make sure that there's a vitamin C food at the same meal so that the absorption can be enhanced, and that makes a huge difference. I now want to look at something which is a childhood disease, as I call it, and it has tripled over the last so many years. And if I asked you to guess what it was, you would know it's obesity. Very unfortunate that we have such a problem with obesity in our society. But I am looking particularly now at childhood obesity. In the Medical Journal of Australia in 2003, and I know that's a few years ago, it showed that there were 23% of children and adolescents who were overweight, and 6% were considered to be obese. Now that may even be worse now. I tried to look for some more up-to-date figures and I wasn't able to find any. These studies are not done continually, and it seemed to be the latest. 23% of children and adolescents are overweight and 6% are considered to be obese. What are the health risks for children who are or who become obese? The first one, low self-esteem and depression. And that is very real for children. They will try and hide it, but that is very real, and that can stay with them until the day that they die. And that is very sad. Hypertension, high blood pressure. You might say high blood pressure for children. There are children from the age group of 10 to 14 who are being diagnosed with high blood pressure today. That's a huge concern, isn't it? Type 2 diabetes, which is called adult onset diabetes. Again, we have young people between the ages of 12 and 15 who are now experiencing the problems associated with diabetes type 2. Sleep apnea, not being able to sleep properly at night, and eating disorders. And so this is a concern. The long-term problems with obesity, once a child or a young person becomes an adult, the problems that we experience then is weight gain. If that isn't backtracked while they are young, that will just continue as they get older. Cardiovascular problems. Gallstones are more prevalent, very much associated with taking in larger quantities than what the body can handle of animal fats, the saturated fats. We spoke about fats just before. They can also come from plant sources. And so having too many of these wrong sort of fats is not good. Again, diabetes, long-term depression, and infertility. And so not a pretty picture. Obesity, overweight, needs to be dealt with while the person is young, and try and help them to overcome this by offering healthier foods, taking them on a bit of an exercise program, walk with them yourself, go hunting for something or other, whatever it is, make it fun, and you'll find that you should be successful. Create a healthy lifestyle culture at home. And you can do that. You may need to just sit and think about it, but you can create a healthy lifestyle culture at home. I'd now like to share with you something that is becoming more and more prevalent, and that is allergic reactions and intolerances to certain food products or food elements in our children. This is a real concern, and it's unfortunate that it seems like it is increasing. Firstly, let's look at allergies, and we're only going to have a brief look. This involves the immune system, and they can cause severe attacks, including something known as anaphylaxis. And as we know that the airways become blocked and a child or an adult can die fairly quickly, and that's very serious. When you look at intolerances, this doesn't involve the immune system, it actually involves the enzyme system, and it will be certain foods that will trigger off certain reactions or symptoms to let you know that the body can't handle that sort of type of food very well. Substances like lactose, which is the sugar in milk, is a fairly common one. What's also becoming known today is that when there are allergic reactions and that food is not taken away, or even intolerances, and that food is allowed to continue coming in even in small quantities, in some people it migrates, which means if there is a problem with gluten, that is the protein in grains, wheat has the highest source, and a little of it comes in because I love a piece of bread. And this is, I have spoken to adults who have had this experience, but it may happen to children too. After a certain amount of years, if they keep taking in a little at a time, then that allergy migrates. And after gluten, the next is lactose. And after lactose, the next one is fruit sugars. Now by then, you're not able to eat too many foods, and it becomes really serious. And so this would mainly be adults because it takes time. Also, we are individuals, and it certainly doesn't happen to everyone. But I think it's good to be aware when the body gives you a signal, whether it's a rash on your skin, or whether it's a pain in your head, or a terrible pain in your stomach, or whatever it is, take notice. And if that keeps happening when you take in certain foods, then don't use those foods. Go and see a doctor who specialises in those areas. And if your child has a problem with food, and a few children do, and that's very concerning. Concerning for you as a parent, because it's very worrying, and it's not easy for the child either. Explain to your child that certain allergic reactions or intolerances can be very serious. So the child knows that it can't just accept any food from their friend at school. You know how kids love to share food. Have some of my sandwich because I don't want it, or this is really nice and you're my friend, so I want to share something with you. Help your children to understand that there are certain foods that they're not able to take. There are a couple of websites which you will see on the screen that could be helpful. One is the Society of Clinical Immunology, and that's an Australian society, and the other one is the Anaphylactic Association of Australia, and you will be able to see that on the screen. And so, looking at good nutrition, it helps to meet energy needs, very important for us as adults as well as for our children. It ensures for our children healthy growth of muscles, of their hair, their eyes, and even their teeth and their gums, all important areas. And it also helps to maintain regular bowel action movement. That's very important too. There are children who suffer with constipation, where the waste matter stays in the system far too long, and it's in the constant contact of the lining of the bowel in a warm environment, and things can go wrong. And so having enough fibre coming in is important. Having enough water coming in is very important, because those two together will help waste matter to go through the way that our Creator designed it. And so that is important as well. Our children are a precious gift. Give them the very best possible start in life. Thank you.